had the Logan Paul and KSI fights. And now I kind of dabble into the fighting world, but you're much more acquitted as far as talking, like watching the games and breaking down everything.
Yeah.
What happened in this Logan and Dylan Dennis fight?
Yeah, so this Logan and Dylan Dennis fight, so there's all the buildup where Logan Paul was basically posting a string of photos of Logan's fiance, which Logan didn't like. He definitely got in Logan's head and he wasn't happy about it, but I just didn't like the whole buildup here where Logan Paul picked a guy who is a 4-time jiu-jitsu world champion and he fought in the UFC, and even when he was winning in the UFC, it was just by taking guys down and grappling. So he specifically chose a guy who's a really good internet troll, a big personality that would be able to promote the fight, cut him basically out of the pay-per-views, and was basically like, yeah, this is a guy that's gonna be an easy fight and it's basically a guaranteed win for Logan, so Logan was just gonna look good. So from the optics coming in, Logan Paul definitely just picked a guy that wasn't a striker and couldn't really compete with him. And then Logan Paul, Derek from More Plays More Dates made a video of him accusing him of being on steroids. I'm not the technical expert, but typically when it comes down to breaking down the sports science, when it comes to steroids and things of that nature, factoring in that Logan Paul's in the WWE and pretty much everyone there is on steroids, it's like you have a guy on steroids facing a jiu-jitsu guy who hasn't fought in 4 years, and then the fight was one of the worst fights I've ever watched. Dylan Dennis basically went out there and trolled him. I don't know if he was trolling him in this fight, but Logan was saying all these things like, I'm going to knock him out in the first round. I'm going to knock him out in this fight. You can guarantee it. And then Dylan basically just did this the entire fight and didn't throw a single punch. And when you have a guy who doesn't even want to box, he wanted to fight Logan in MMA, but he was locked into a contract, and you have 2 trolls that are really good at promoting the fight. You get all of the eyes on you. I believe they sold 1.6 million pay-per-views in total with the KSI and Tommy Fury fight and the Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul fight. It's just a pathetic product. And I don't really respect the influencer boxing. I respect that you get in the ring, and I'm never going to disrespect anyone who gets in the ring, because it's definitely a tough thing to do, especially boxing live in front of everyone. But it looked like Dylan was just trying to not get knocked out, and then he wanted to choke Logan. He wanted to try and choke Logan out before the refs could really separate them. And that was pretty much the fight. It was like pretty pathetic product compared to the buildup, and then the fight was just a whimper.
Now, do you think that this could be like the beginning of the end of the internet boxing era? Because it seems like you're not the only one that feels that way as far as like how the boxing fight went, especially with Dylan Dennis not taking it very seriously. Yeah. Do you think that this is something that could be a turning point for the internet boxing era, where it kind of fades into oblivion at some point? Yeah,
the only interesting person in influencer boxing is Jake Paul. Like, Jake definitely would have knocked Logan out, or not Logan. He definitely would have knocked Dylan out, especially in this fight. And I think the fact that Logan wasn't able to knock him out definitely dings Logan as a fighter. And it definitely took my respect for him as a boxer down a level, because you're facing a guy who didn't throw a punch. He's just kind of playing to the crowd. He's laying down in the middle of the fight, which a bunch of people got a bunch of memes out of, and then he basically tries to choke Logan out. And it's like, Dylan knows that if he met Logan in the street, he would take him out, and he's like, these guys are boxers. He's like, boxing's like whatever. He hit me. He didn't really stun me at all during this fight. And the fact that Logan couldn't knock a guy out who refused to throw a punch, he just threw like a little punch. He had his stance was kind of like Sean Strickland. Then he just threw like a punch like this, which is more like a UFC fun. Like, Dylan wasn't taking the fight seriously. He was training MMA to prepare for it. And then Logan was training boxing. He has access to some of the best trainers in the world, and you couldn't knock him out. That definitely takes the influencer fighting down a level. And I think Jake's the only legitimate boxer in there, and he's not even a legit boxer because he faces old MMA guys, and it's a completely different sport. And then when he faced Tommy Fury, people could definitely see okay, Tommy's definitely on a different level than he is boxing wise. I do want to, that's the only interesting rematch. And if Jake could beat him, I want to see him face a boxer, but it's until these guys face actual trained boxers who have been training like from they were young, who's not Tommy Fury, who's out there on, I believe it was Love Island, the show he was on. So it's kind of like cringe there. But
and then I saw that there was a big KSI had a kind of a bit of a meltdown after the decision, losing the fight to he faced Tommy Fury. Yeah. So KSI was upset about the decision. Is that decision warranted? Is it the proper decision? And how did that fight go?
Neither of them should have won that fight. Like both of them should have been disqualified because both of these fights were very bad for different reasons. So Dylan Dennis in the first fight refused to throw a punch, and then the next fight was bad because KSI hugged Tommy Fury 76 times in a 6-round fight, and then it was averaging 13 hugs per round. So Tommy Fury would come in, and then KSI would just immediately hug him, and then Tommy Fury come back in. KSI would hug him, and it was just too much time where KSI was holding on to him. Every time the ref would ask them to break, Tommy Fury would put his gloves up, and KSI was still hanging on to him. So I feel like maybe KSI could have won because he got a shot on him, but the guy who's getting some shots off after they would break was Tommy Fury. So it's like, I don't even care that KSI lost the fight. Maybe actually try and box him instead of just hugging him 13 times each round. If you want to be a professional cuddler, maybe try OnlyFans or something like that. But like, if you're just going to hug the guy every like 13 times per round, it's like, it's not an enjoyable product. You hype this fight out like you both are going to knock each other out. And then you can't talk all of the shit before the fight, like he's a boxer and I'm going to show him. And then when you lose the fight, you go to, oh, he's a boxer. It's like a disgrace to the sport if you like give me the win, and then it would like delegitimize boxing if you give me the win. It's like, well, you can't go from I'm going to beat this boxer for my legacy and all that, and then go to a whiny bitch after the fight where it's like, oh, well, he's a boxer. That's the only reason why you didn't want me to win the fight. So it's like having a meltdown as a professional fighter and being like, this isn't fair. It's like, it's everything wrong with like, I don't want to be like, oh, everything wrong with our generation, but like, you just have to take your loss on the chin. Even Jake tweeted out after the fight, he's like, even when I lost for Tommy Fury, I took my loss like a man, and I set an example for the younger generation on how to lose, reflect, and then get better from it. And then the fact that he was just whining after the fight is like, definitely discredits it, especially when you're like, I'm gonna go out there and beat the boxer, and it's like, well, I'm the boxer, so I should have won, even though I went 6 rounds. So it's like very unimpressive. And then for Tommy Fury, it's like he didn't really have a chance to fight if KSI is just grabbing him 76 times in this fight. And it's like the announcers in this fight were worse, like made it unwatchable. Like, I don't know who that guy is, Ariel. Fire him, because while watching the fight, he was doing nothing but riding Logan. He didn't understand the buildup with him and Dylan Dennis, and he didn't understand that Dylan was just trolling him. They were taking these fights way too seriously. It's like, you can't have a cartoonish fight with buildup where we're talking all the smack and neither of the fighters can actually box, and then have super serious commentators talking about the fight that are like, oh yeah, they're just riding for KSI and Logan clearly. And like that definitely damaged the product here. So it's like, yeah, Tommy Fury, it's like, I'll give him he can win the fight, but it's like they both should have lost it. I would have had them fight another 6 rounds. Like, what the hell was that? Can we actually throw some punches and combinations without grabbing each other? So I felt like 2 very different fights, 2 unwatchable fights for very different reasons. One, Dylan Dennis was trolling Logan by not throwing a punch. I don't know if he was trolling or he legitimately just can't fight, but he got his money, I guess, unless he actually gives his purse to Logan, which was the bet that they made pre-fight. He probably won't do that because in the press conference, he's like, oh, well, we didn't shake on it, but we shook on MMA. And then this fight, it's like, yeah, I mean, you can't whine if you're not even going to fight him and you're just going to hug him. Like, do you want to be a professional boxer or a professional cuddler? Like, pick a lane.
Yeah. So it seems like this fight was kind of an L just in the boxing sphere for sure. Because even the Tommy Fury and Jake Paul fight, that did really well numbers wise. And it was a good fight overall.
They actually boxed.
Yeah.
It's like even Nate Diaz was a more entertaining event because Jake Paul puts on a good event. Him and Tyron Woodley was a interesting. There was some like accusations of Tyron Woodley being paid off to take the fall, but that's illegal. So you can't do that. Like, that's not allowed, especially because people are placing wagers on these fights. And then even with Anderson Silva, that was a better fight than this. And then Nate Diaz. So it's like the only rematch I would want to see is Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. And then you have to go out there and fight an actual boxer if you win that fight.